Welcome everyone, my name is Cody Scott, and in this video, we review the Canon RF 1.8 35mm. My friends, my family, and everyone else in between, welcome to a channel that teaches you how to explore, inspire, and engage as an active videographer. My name is Cody Scott, and if you're new to this channel, feel free to consider hitting that subscribe button or dislike button. Gotcha. Today we're going to review the Canon RF 35mm 1.8. The characteristics that we're going to review are the chromatic aberration, the sharpness, the spherical distortion, the optical distortion, as well as the bokeh. Starting with chromatic aberration. To better understand some of these characteristics, you first must understand the way light bends through a lens. Light has to go through a lens, bend, and then hit your sensor. As it's doing that, there are certain things happening. Those are the characteristics we will discuss. First, chromatic aberration. Chromatic aberration is when light passes through a lens and it's refracting red, green, and blue rays of light. As those rays start to bend back and land on your sensor, there might be a little bit of balance that's a little shifted. You'll see this in windows, you'll see this on the edges of trees, and the more you stop down to like a 1.8, 1.4, or 1.2, then you will start to see chromatic aberration happening in the bokeh or the highlights of an image. Now, the more expensive a lens, the more elements are in there to compensate for some of these inconsistencies. This lens, however, has a few elements, which means they're going to be sacrificing some of those imperfections, starting with chromatic aberration. Now, the chromatic aberration on this lens is noticeable. On a scale of 0 to 5, 0 being that there is none at all, 5 being that there is way too much, I'm gonna give this a 3. When you start to stop down to a 1.8 and even around a 2, you start to see some of the chromatic aberration happening within the highlights as well as some of the tree lines if you're shooting outside. It becomes even more noticeable when you have an ND filter or polarizer attached to the front of the lens. Characteristic number 2, spherical distortion. Now, spherical distortion is when light passes through a lens, bends, and tries to focus that light on the sensor. Sometimes it lands in front of the sensor, sometimes behind, sometimes right on the sensor. And as it's doing that, you're going to see the soft glow, this warm, sometimes it's ghostly glow described. This lens on a scale of 0 to 5, 0 being none at all, 5 being there's way too much, I'm gonna give it a 3. A 2.5 could also be appropriate, but a 3, when you start to stop down to a 1.8, even at a 2.2, you're gonna start to see some of the spherical distortion happening with this lens. It can be a bad thing, it can be a good thing. It doesn't take away from the sharpness, but you do start to see that little glow happening. It becomes more evident when you start to add in satin filters and pro mist filters to bloom the highlights. Moving on to topic number 3, optical distortion. Now, optical distortion you typically get with wide-angle lenses. The further you get out on the edge of a lens, the more perspective you see, or the image starts to bend a little bit. The more elements to compensate for that inconsistency, you'll see less of it. However, in this lens, you can see it's a very small lens, it's very lightweight, and there's not a lot of elements to compensate for that. However, the glass is so small on the front that you don't really receive any of the optical distortion. So on a scale of 0 to 5, 0 being none at all, 5 being there's way too much of it, I'm going to give this a 1. Now, it could be a 0. However, 1 is a safe bet because I might not be spotting it, but you know, you guys probably could, potentially. I'm still giving it a 1. Moving on to bokeh. Now, this thing is a bokeh champ. It compresses the background quite a bit because this is a wide-angle lens and it's also a macro lens. And macro lenses, as you know, compress the background quite a bit. The bokeh coming out of this lens is gorgeous. You get creamy bokeh at a 1.8 if you're close up to a subject, but if you're far away from a subject and you're shooting at a 2.8, you still get that nice compressed bokeh background. On a scale of 0 to 5, 0 being terrible, 5 being the best, I'm going to give this a 4. There are some lenses that do shoot better, but in comparison to the price and the lens you get, this is going to be a safe 4. Moving on to the final topic, sharpness. Now, in terms of sharpness, The sharpness is determined by the glass that's put in the lens to make up for those inconsistencies, as well as retaining quality as light passes through all of those. As the light has the ability to pass through without losing quality, it's going to retain sharpness. Now this lens has a few elements. So is it sharp? Yes, it is a sharp lens, and it's a macro, so it gets even sharper when you get close up to certain subjects. Now, on a scale of 0 to 5, 0 being terrible and 5 being super sharp, I'm going to give this a 3. Now, I'm giving it a 3 because when you stop down a little bit, which is what this lens is made for, you start to lose sharpness, but that's expected. So when I shoot with this lens, I keep it above a 2.8, but the soft spot is around a 3.5, maybe even a 4.0 aperture. If you'd like to pick up this lens, I'll leave a link in the description where you can click on it and purchase it. Now, I do have to say, because of legal purposes, that I'm not getting paid to talk about this product, and I'm not sponsored by them whatsoever. Well, that's it for me, guys. If you found this video helpful and you'd like to learn more, please hit that subscribe button and that like button to keep content like this coming to you guys. I'll see you in the next one.